Welcome to the next part of my advanced full bullet character matchup guide. Today's video will feature All For One. Now All For One is a very difficult character for full bullet to face, and this is for a few reasons. The first one is All For One's superior HP and high damaging alpha makes alpha trading against All For One surprisingly difficult and something you really shouldn't be going for, as it will often be close to an even trade if you look at the HP percentages. Now Full Bullet will still eventually come out on top on a War of Attrition in a alpha battle against All For One. However, it's still not something Full Bullet really wants to go for all the time. The second thing that makes All For One very deadly for Full Bullet is the same thing that makes him very deadly for the entire cast. His Gamma. If you get hit by his Gamma, expect to immediately die. This is the safest way to play against All For One, is to immediately expect that if he hits a Gamma on you, that you will instantaneously die. And that there will be no counterplay to it at all. The only thing I could recommend to avoid Gamma is to try and stay on the ground as best as you possibly can, so that way you are always timed and prepared to roll the Gamma. There are several different roll cues for Gamma, but I won't go into that. I'm sure there's a video online somewhere if you really need to learn more roll cues. But rolling All For One's Gamma will be your only real source of preventing it. There is, I guess, a few other things Full Bullet could do, since All For One doesn't have armor. So if All For One uses the grounded variant of his Gamma, you can hit him with alphas to knock him out of it, you can hit him with a Gamma to knock him out of it, and you can hit him with a Beta to knock him out of it. However, a lot of AFOs tend to do a jump into Gamma. If AFO decides to do this, you will only really have the ability to alpha spam him, which can be easy since he leaves himself quite open when he goes for Gamma. But alpha spamming him, you have to hit 2 alphas before he gets the Gamma off, which can sometimes be tricky depending on the scenario. All For One, you can also land a jump Beta if you are close enough and he is not too far off the ground. Simply doing a jump into Beta to catch him with your heel and bring him down into the Beta slam part could also be a way of dealing with All For One when he uses his Gamma in the air. However, do not expect this to work if he is too far above you. Be fully prepared to roll his Gamma at all times, or you will pay the price. We've covered All For One's Alpha and Gamma. Overall, I would highly suggest not trying to engage him in the medium range unless you know you are going in with a favorable exchange, such as All For One being on low health, or you having a significantly higher level alpha than the All For One. Otherwise, I would not recommend going for alphas in the medium range against All For One. Ends up in an alpha trade, it's no big deal. Just don't try to stay a prolonged fight in an alpha trade against an All For One, as this will not go as well as you might think. Especially since All For One's alpha can be used to punish every move you have. Your own alpha is quick and doesn't really have a way for him to punish you for it. However, your Gamma leads you into a straight-ish path. If you use this out in the open, All For One can easily rack up significant damage on you with his alpha if his aim is good. Another thing that he can punish you with your alpha is your Beta. If you whiff your Beta, expect to eat at least 2 alphas. Unless you have the ability to do Beta cancel. I didn't do that right there. But if you have the ability to do Beta into Gamma cancel, you might be able to mitigate some of the damage that All For One is able to get on you. Doing that can potentially mitigate the punish that All For One gets to about 1 alpha. Now, All For One's Beta is a very tricky move. It is often used as a combo extender rather than an actual aggressive tool, but it does go through walls. It is worth noting that this move, of course, goes through Full Bullets Gamma, but this kinda goes without saying. Of course it does. It goes through everything. Yeah. All for Ones tend to not use that ability as like a raw attack. Most All for Ones tend to only use that ability in a combo extender after Gamma, or to use it to like finish off downed opponents, as it's pretty good at that too. But it generally leaves All for One quite vulnerable to attacks. I would highly suggest, if you see an All for One going for beta, that you hit him with a couple alphas of your own, as not only will this prevent anybody that he may potentially be comboing, but it would also do hefty damage to the All for One, and he should be a key target for you to take out, as All for One's Gamma can be quite menacing in later zones, and can be a real menace if you're constantly having to worry about staying on the ground and being prepared to dodge roll at all times. The simple presence of All for One does hinder Full Bullet's ability to essentially play the game entirely, as if All for One is in the field, you will not be able to reliably go for betas as easily without worrying about getting pulled in by All for One, and you will most certainly not be able to go for too many gammas upwards, as if the All for One ends up being underneath you while you go for a gamma, you will die. He will grab you with his gamma, and you will have basically nothing you can do about it. Basically, when All for One is present, it forces Full Bullet to stay on the ground and really makes him think about when he wants to use his betas, as if he mistimes the betas, he will not have the ability to do a dodge roll in time or to dodge All for One's Gamma. And dodging All for One's Gamma is incredibly important to this matchup, as otherwise this matchup would be practically impossible. Now, final note I want to mention about All for One is I would keep in mind what quirk skill that he has as his secondary quirk. It can be any character in the entire game, including skill sets, and can make this quite difficult to know how to face All for One if he knows how to use his quirk skill set. I would suggest keeping in mind what character All for One has. You can do this mostly by just seeing what the All for One uses and potentially keeping an eye out for what All for One uses his special action on. It is important to note that when All for One starts his special action, he cannot dodge roll, so you can land alphas and betas and punish him heavily for attempting to steal a quirk from, say, a teammate or an enemy. Overall, I think the Full Bullet versus All for One matchup is definitely in favor of All for One. In one context, I would give it about a 30-70 in All for One's favor, as All for One's ability to alpha spam you after your gammas and at least contest what he needs to do is to make sure that he doesn't let you get close enough to go for a beta, which All for One can do quite easily due to his ridiculous cooldown and range on it. He should be a key priority target for you to face in the battle, and you should be really trying to make sure that the All for One dies, as he really hinders your ability to play the game and really makes it difficult for you to play or to land other kills on opponents, as All for One has quite the skill set that makes it quite tough for Full Bullet. In a 3v3 scenario, though, I definitely think Full Bullet has some unique cases where he could be very useful in this matchup in particular, and this is when All for One lands a gamma on somebody else but not yourself. You can use your alphas in order to knock AFO out of his gamma into beta combos, which can potentially be used to save a teammate's life and cause the win of that fight. This makes the matchup a lot better whenever you have teammates present, as focusing down the All for One is a lot easier to do when there's 3 people focusing him instead of just 1. Prevent punish on said teammate by simply doing 2 alphas or the aforementioned moves, Beta or Gamma will always work depending on the situation. But Alpha tends to be the most reliable option for All For One when he does this, since he leaves himself very vulnerable whenever he goes for a Beta and Gamma. There isn't much more to say on this matchup. Overall, keep in mind what quirk All For One has, as it can be a key contributor to the matchup, and try to stay out of the air when you face him. Otherwise, just face him like you would most other opponents, as his close quarters game isn't fantastic, but his Gamma is very solid at pushing you backwards. Applying pressure on All For One in the close quarters can be a decent way of dealing with him. However, if the All For One is smart, he simply would just use his Gamma tap in order to knock you backwards and try and escape. Chasing All For One can be quite dangerous, since he can kite you rather well. Alright, tune in next time for the next video, which I do believe will be Dobby.